Sox in the basement.
So I guess we had technical difficulties on the last episode. I'm just learning about it as we're sitting down recording now, so there's not much I can do about it. But I've gone and I've looked at the source for the last podcast, and everything's there. The whole 30-minute show is there, Ed. But for some reason, some people on only a few podcast players, not all podcast players, those people only got 24 minutes of the last show. And I can't explain it, because if you go to soxinthebasement.com and listen to the feed directly off the website, the whole show is there. If I go to the source, which is the hosting site Podbean, it's all right there. I've even re-uploaded the file to see if it could fix it. Just certain podcast players, for some reason, cut the last show at 24 minutes. I cannot explain it. It's a weird, wild, off-putting world lately. I want to say we had camera problems 2 shows ago, and now we have an app or two that didn't, for some reason, upload the entire episode of Sox in the Basement. So I don't know what's going to be wrong with this show, but I'm trying, folks. It's been an inauspicious start to 2026.
Well, and I'm purely generative AI at this point. I'm not even a real person anymore. So.
You're not even real. Yeah, people don't even know that. Yeah, Ed died years ago.
Yeah, I'm fully realized AI.
Speaking of inauspicious, I know that there was an article out. Who wrote the thing calling the White Sox the winners of the offseason so far? Who was that?
Dane Perry from CBS Sports gave the White Sox the only A out of the major leagues for the offseason so far.
All right. And what was the reasoning again?
Well, he likes the Murakami signing because, assuming that Murakami has some success here, it's a really high upside signing that changes the makeup of the White Sox. Most other teams, as I'm reading through this article, what he's saying is basically, you addressed a couple of needs here and there. You picked up a couple of guys. A lot of the signings and trades have just been for a guy, right? And so what he's saying is basically most teams haven't taken the big swings yet. The White Sox are the only ones that have really done so. He gives a B+ to the Blue Jays for Dylan Cease and for the other Japanese player whose name escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, I would say that they're having a better offseason than we're having. Here's the thing. I think it's interesting. People look at the Murakami signing and they go, "That's amazing. The White Sox did that. They're having a great offseason." And I'm not saying they're having a bad one. I'm very happy with that signing. And I'm happy with the fact that I see that they're still active, and we're going to talk about it. They're already looking at another starting pitcher out there. I don't know if it's the right one, but they're linked to somebody right now. And I have no problem with that signing. I love that signing. I was excited about that signing. But the White Sox are like the kid at the end of the bench in the basketball game who never scores, And he got into the game and he sunk a couple of shots and the place went nuts because the expectations are low, right? Somebody else signs Murakami, they may not even get an A for their offseason, even if it's the same player going to their team. As much as I also believe that exact player with that exact set of skills is not a Japanese international superstar that's going to bring in money from the international market to benefit the franchise, the Sox don't sign him. Who he is and where he's coming from and what he brings financially to the team that pays for part of that salary is why you convince your owner, we're going to get that deal done. That exact player already here in Major League Baseball or a free agent in MLB that didn't come in that set of circumstances with that added bonus to him, I don't think the Sox sign him.
No, which, I mean, it's academic because they did sign him and he is here. And for whatever reason, Chris Getz was able to get that done. I actually like the fact that there's some out of town laurels being thrown his way. And yeah, I mean, the Blue Jays, he basically says, Dane Perry says in the article, if Luis Robert Jr. is traded and they nail the return, this could be an A+ offseason for Chris Getz. He also says that if the Blue Jays, re-sign Bo Bichette or sign Kyle Tucker, they get an A+ for the offseason. And his reasons are within context. Dylan Cease, he thinks that they overpaid for Dylan Cease for what he is and what he brings to the Blue Jays rotation. Kazuma Okamoto is the third baseman that they signed, the Japanese player that they signed. And what he says is he doesn't know where he fits because his defense isn't good enough for what the Blue Jays want to do with their team defensively. And the only spot they can put him is at third base where he's just okay. So when you think about it in context, it is important when you're talking about like how does the offseason look for the White Sox. Sean Newcomb doesn't necessarily move the needle. Anthony Kay doesn't necessarily move the needle, but they do provide some production, whether they end up in the bullpen or the starting rotation. But, Murakami, hey, I mean, it is one of those things where for the next couple of years, if he comes here and is able to make contact consistently and is able to hit home runs with the power that he showed over in Japan, he is a huge signing because we've talked about what the lineup looks like with him and with a full season of Colson Montgomery, both of them together, and how you have power in the lineup then that you haven't had for a long, long time.
You mentioned Sean Newcomb there, and I saw it this week that it's being suggested by Will Venable that he's in the mix to try to win a starting job. And I've become convinced now at this point that the White Sox are telling everybody they have a chance at the starting job. Like when they're approaching a free agent, they're like, oh yeah, and you may be one of our 5 starters. It's not true. I don't think it's true. I don't think you get Sean Newcomb to be a starter. We went over this on another show. All right. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating this to people who already heard me say it, but his numbers are atrocious as a starter. Like he's had a couple of good games in there. I think he almost got a no-hitter at one point. Like it's not like he's every time out bad. But overall, looking at a season when he's a starter, it's not good. It doesn't jump off the page. It's not exciting. He's a 5th starter at best, and he's a shaky 5th starter on an actual competitive team. He probably doesn't even make it onto a competitive team as a 5th starter. Just looking at his numbers, looking at the back of his baseball card, looks a lot better as a relief pitcher. But I think what they're doing now is they're just sitting there telling everybody you have a chance. I mean, like, let's just see how many names I can rattle off here that supposedly have a chance to be a starting pitcher. I mean, Shane Smith is going to make the rotation, right? Davis Martin is going to make the rotation. You went out and you signed Anthony Kay. You would think they're thinking about him in the rotation. Sean Burke, Jonathan Cannon, now Sean Newcomb, add him in there. Add in guys that were in the bullpen that may have an opportunity to compete to get in there, like a guy like Mike Vassell could very easily get in there. Drew Thorpe is coming back from injury. Then you have all the guys that are sitting down in the minors right now, like Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, that like they're hoping they'll see before the year is out. They're talking to Griffin Canning, supposedly, according to MLB trade rumors. Like the Sox are one of the teams in on Griffin Canning. Another guy that, I mean, there's been flashes. Like I have at times said to myself, he's a really talented guy. But you look at the back of the baseball card, he puts too many guys on base and he's shaky. And everybody thinks they can fix Griffin Canning because when he came out in his first year, he was really good. And there was all kinds of potential. But then he got the injury and he was out for a season or a season and a half. And he came back and everybody's like trying to like say, okay, well, all we got to do is work with this kid and we're going to get him back to what he was when he first got to the majors. He's 29 now or 30 years old. Got to look that up to be sure. He's 29 currently. He's about to turn 30.
He's up there.
Yeah, he's about 100 days or so away from his 30th birthday. This isn't a spring chicken anymore. I don't know what you're going to teach him. I mean, yeah, there are pitchers that go over to Japan and they work out a new pitch. Eric Fetty redid his entire career in his mid-30s, so I understand that, right? Miro Kelly did that too. The pitcher that's for the, I want to say he's still with the Diamondbacks. But
you're hoping that that's what Anthony Kay has done.
That's what you're hoping has happened. So yeah, I guess
he's gone over and
you could fix a pitcher at this age. I guess you can do that. But I mean, like, it isn't like everybody else hasn't been trying already. I guess that's the thing. I mean, we see the Angels stuck with him for a while. Then the Mets gave it a shot. And what did the Mets get out of him last year? They got a 1.376 whip. Walks and hits per innings pitched. So he puts on way too many bases. He had 16 starts for them. He only got 76 innings out of those 16 starts. He doesn't go late in the games. And I don't know if he fits what they're trying to do. Like they must really see something in him. And I keep looking at the pitchers that are out there. If they're looking to add another arm, and we've talked about it, I believe they're going to add another arm that they want to put in there, but they're looking for an arm that's going to be consistent and get them innings and sit in that 3 spot or 4 spot in the rotation and be like somebody who's stable inside their relationship. I don't know if Griffin Canning gives that to you. That's an odd name for me to be reading about this morning.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, the only thing I can figure is you're kicking the tires on a guy that, he's an established, although not very good, major league starter. and he probably comes cheap because his market is really low because of exactly what you just described. He has gone from the Angels to the Mets to the Braves, and it's not been pretty for him at any of those stops. No one's been able to fix the guy. No one's been able to get enough out of him. And so the White Sox think they might be different. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's just one of those things where this is Adrian Hauser again, where they think that here's a guy that at the very least, walking into spring training, might be a guy that you can sit there and say, okay, if he's healthy, he gives us innings and we can plug him in if absolutely everything else goes wrong. So if that's what they're looking for him, okay, great. If they're thinking that they have something lightning in a bottle with him, I find that hard to believe, but anything's possible. I really do think though that what were you expecting from the White Sox offseason? They weren't going to go and trade for Edward Cabrera like the Cubs just did, right? They weren't going to trade a top prospect to get another pitcher who is really talented stuff wise, but has questionable control. They have two of those guys with Cannon and Burke. And I think what they're really doing is when you look at the veterans that they're signing, they're trying to push those two. They're trying to push them to sit there and say, get your act together, boys, because those are the two that they really want to have in the rotation because they've given them opportunities and they haven't been traded, they haven't been released, they haven't been let go this offseason. They're still in conversation and still in, off-season photographs with the rest of their rotation mates, allegedly.
Well, what's interesting is even MLB trade rumors, and I don't know, maybe I missed it, but they basically say that like they think that Sean Burke's locked into that rotation as they're discussing Griffin Canning. And I'm like, is he? Like I think you're right about this. I think the idea that like they're like all these guys have a chance to be a starter. One, it attracts free agents. Pitchers that are like, I want to find a place where I can at least compete for a starting job. That's how they're getting guys to say, yeah, I'll sign with the White Sox for that amount of money. That's something they're looking for. There's only so many rotation spots. And two, I think you're right. I think that Burke and Cannon are guys they would love to see like come into spring training and hold those jobs. So there's lots of competition for them. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to watch the rotation in spring, especially because they keep adding arms. It's just going to be amazing to watch it. The only thing that would disappoint me, what would just disappoint me terribly, is if they're already in the first week of spring training telling you at least 4, if not all 5 of the names they think are going to be in the rotation. Let that be like a war. Turn it into a bloodbath. Guys going out there every day on the mound trying to win a starting job for the White Sox. Don't make your decision too early. That's what I would say. And I don't think they will because, they did find starters out of nowhere last year. I mean, Shane Smith was not expected to be a starter. So I do think that they will let that happen. And that's the smart thing to do too. Let players go out there, let pitchers go out there and compete in open competition because I think what you're going to do is you're going to find the best of the best. The good pitchers will rise to the top, and that seems to be the plan going into 26. For exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. You do not look at pictures in a book or dingy example windows that are brought into your living room. Instead, you go to their showroom and you see everything the way it will look when it gets installed in your home. That way you're not guessing. There's an owner and showroom. There's one on site. So you get all your questions answered and you got somebody supervising the deal to make sure it's done right with all of their own installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing this way for 40 years. In Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands custom made. No stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. So yes, I think competition in spring training, lots of pitchers. I don't know if I'm sold on Griffin Canning. I don't know if I believe that Sean Newcomb is legitimately getting if I had to bet right now, I would not put him in the rotation. I think he was signed to be a relief pitcher. I don't care what they're saying right now. There are not enough chairs for all the guys that are playing musical chairs in the rotation. They have too many people they've told you've got a chance at the starting rotation with the White Sox.
Well, and in my mind, you can never have too many people with that opportunity because the competition is going to breed somebody really locking in and focusing in on what they have to do and how they have to improve and get better. I don't like it when you give unproven talent a guarantee because when you do that, we've seen what happened with Rick and Kenny in the last quote unquote rebuild where everybody was anointed. We've talked about this at length. Everybody was anointed when they came up. Andrew Vaughn was anointed as the next great hitter on the south side of Chicago. Well, Andrew Vaughn maybe never, was going to live up to that no matter what. Even with the Brewers, even when he had that stretch, he was hot, but he wasn't exactly like, the greatest hitter of all time. So the hype machine that sometimes comes with guys that get signed and that we've been fed for years with the White Sox, I would much rather see Chris Getz and I would much rather see Will Venable sit there and go into spring training, sit there and say, you know what, everything's on the table. I'm not taking anything for granted unless you are an established major league superstar. Now, that said, are Kyle Teel and Edgar Caro necessarily going to be knocked off by Corey Lee if he just gets hot in spring training? No, but are Kyle Teel and Edgar Caro in competition to see who's going to get more playing time behind the plate? Who's potentially going to get more at bats as a DH? Yeah, they're in competition with each other. I've seen some clickbait headlines suggesting Chase Meidroth's job is in trouble, which doesn't seem to be realistic. But if I'm the White Sox, if Lenyn Sosa lasts all the way into spring training, yes, I'm telling them both that second base is somewhat up for grabs because Chase Meidroth better not rest on what he did last year because it wasn't great. It was good. It was probably better than we expected, but it wasn't like, oh my God, this guy is a superstar. He's arrived. Same thing even with Colson Montgomery. You got to hold Colson Montgomery's feet to the fire until he shows as a pro that he knows how to turn it on and do it year in and year out, year after year. Miguel Vargas is the same way. I could go on. There really isn't anybody on this team that doesn't deserve some level of competition, with maybe the exception of you're going to play Andrew Benintendi. You're going to find that guy at bats because you're paying him more than anybody else on the team except for Luis Robert Jr. And if Robert's here, he's going to play as well, mainly because with Robert at this point, there's no outfield competition to be had. I'm sorry, he's not going to lose to Brooks Baldwin. He's not going to lose to Everson Pereira. He maybe should, but all those guys have to be pushed, right? And I think that's one of the things that maybe went wrong with the Robert era of prospects, because I'll label that the Robert era. Eloy Jimenez was anointed, and Eloy Jimenez was never fully pushed, and he was allowed to go out and do things that were stupid and injure himself, right? There was never a better left field option that was pushing him to the DH role. And Robert and Yoan Moncada, which I love the clickbait of Yoan Moncada, was on the White Sox radar earlier this year.
That was the funniest thing. If you missed that over the holiday season, the rumor was out there that the White Sox were interested in Yoan Moncada. I think I responded.
They are not.
I think I responded to that tweet from the supposed MLB insider that put it out by saying, "Is Yoan Moncada telling you this?" Because the White Sox didn't want Yoan Moncada. It was the silliest thing I saw. It was ludicrous. It was absolutely insane. It was one of the funnier moments of the offseason for me that they linked him to the White Sox. The White Sox don't want him. They never want to see him again.
They don't. There's no interest in bringing back a guy who, while he was here, failed to live up to the potential and the talent. We saw what happened, and then he arrived, and then he got the contract, and then what? Constant soft tissue injuries, constant ticky-tack stuff. He makes the music videos and records the album in the one off season, comes in, looks the part, but what's he doing? He's hitting fly balls to the gap every single time up. If he's not striking out, he's just hitting fly balls to the gap. There's no reason going into this off season for the White Sox not to just load the deck with guys that have a chance and have a prayer. I mean, even a guy like Oliver Dunn, who, we talked about in the last show with what the bench is going to look like and how he is a guy that, because he's got some positional flexibility, should be a guy that pushes for a bench spot. But if I'm Miguel Vargas as the presumptive third baseman, I am looking over my shoulder at Oliver Dunn, sitting there going, this guy could eat into my at-bats if I don't have my head on right going into spring training. I don't think that he's got to be a given either. I mean, it's just,
I think Miguel Vargas,
it should be competition.
I think Miguel Vargas, hopefully he understands it, but otherwise somebody needs to sit down and kind of explain it to him. Like, hey, not only are there going to be players around this spring that are going to push you, because if you're not ready to go, if we're getting, there's two tails of him, right? There's like the good months that we saw, and then there's the months where you're like, I don't want this guy on my team. And what he did last year was essentially give you like what his best was with the Dodgers. He had a little sample size with the Dodgers that first half of 24, and the White Sox traded for it, and then he bottomed out and was bad. His overall line, his overall baseball card, looking at his average and his slugging percentage and his on-base percentage and all that stuff like that, looks like what they traded for. That was the floor. They want more than that. So, he's going to get pushed a little bit. And not only should it be explained to him that, like, hey, they're not going to wait around on you forever, but if you look down in their minor league system, there's other options that will be here in a year or two that will definitely move him out of the way. I mean, Billy Carlson's young, but that's a shortstop that's playing well. Caleb Bonnemer is a shortstop third base guy who could also end up in the outfield, right? You're going to go out and probably draft Rock Chalowski. He's going to get here quick in a couple of years, right? And if he gets here,
Rock Chalowski's not going to spend a ton of time in the minors.
And if he comes up and they go, we're going to make him the shortstop, Colson Montgomery goes over and pushes Vargas out of the way. Like, Miguel Vargas is a nice player who's got pedigree from his draft, being drafted, showed off a lot in the minor leagues. They went out and they got him in a trade. But if in a year or two, this is that, I mean, like, if he doesn't continue a trajectory of getting better, he won't be here. He's not going to be one of these guys he's not going to linger as long as Andrew Vaughn. Let's put it that way. Like, Andrew Vaughn got way too many seasons to figure it out. Miguel Vargas won't get that.
No, Miguel Vargas, if he doesn't perform this year, if he doesn't show improvement this year, I can't imagine why he'd be around in 27. Yeah. I mean, because even if you're waiting on Bonnemer, even if you're waiting on Chalowski, even if you're waiting on Carlson to come up, the idea that the White Sox could go out and get a major league third baseman, somebody to man the position until those guys come around, especially in 27 when Carlson and Bonnemer will have had a chance to move up again throughout the minors. And you never know who else is going to emerge in your minor league system this year. I mean, they've got other third basemen, they've got other shortstops, they've got other infielders. So yeah, Miguel Vargas is one of those guys, and Chase Meidroth is one of those guys, and Colson Montgomery to an extent is one of those guys. I think he's got a longer leash.
And what if Lenny Sosa is still around on this team? They don't move him. Like that is definitely pushing Miguel Vargas, even if Sosa's terrible and he's a butcher in defensively. If the bat's playing, like that'll also push Vargas.
If the bat's playing, then Lenny Sosa's probably playing.
Well, but the funny thing is, I still believe Vargas gets the job. I don't think that he's in danger.
100%.
Like, that's the thing. But there's at least something there. I think that's what I'm trying to point out. Like, what I enjoy with this White Sox team and the way it's being built is that there's not a void behind a player. I felt like too many times when we got to the beginning of this decade and we had all these stars or these supposed gonna be stars that showed up, right? Who didn't pan out.
There was no plan B.
There was nobody behind them. There was no plan B. There was nothing that you sat there and said, okay, well, if this doesn't work, there's somebody behind him to push. I don't think Chris Getz is building his team that way. And so that's what I like about it, right? Like, I want Miguel Vargas to succeed. I believe if somebody sat there and said, you have to make a bet. Is Miguel Vargas your third baseman this year? Does he get better? I actually think so. I would probably bet in that direction. But I do like the idea of, if he falls on his face, we're not sitting around going, what are we going to do? Like, I think there'll be a short-term solution. There'll be a long-term solution coming up from the minors. And I don't think Getz would hesitate to find a bridge solution if the minor league guy wasn't there yet and the short-term solution wasn't making any sense. Like, that's the difference I feel with this front office.
Well, and think about Chris Getz last year with the rotation. When Burke and Cannon start to falter, right? What does he do? He goes and he finds Adrian Hauser. He goes and he makes a trade for Aaron Savali. Now, again, did he trade for aces? No. Are these big blockbuster moves? No. Were these guys that filled rotation holes because your opening day starter started to suck really, really badly? Yeah. Yeah, at some point, Burke and Cannon needed to get out of the rotation. They were harming the team. And, these veterans, these bridge moves, Aaron Savali was probably never sticking around. Adrian Hauser might have been nice if they re-signed him, but they ended up flipping him for Curtis Mead. It, Mead's another guy too. I mean, there's players around. If you look at what Getz has done, he has created competition even in the outfield. Going and getting Dustin Harris, Tristan Peters, and Everson Pereira. Those are not names that, as Sox fans, were sitting there going, "Oh my God, it's solved. We've solved right field. We've solved left field." No, but what has he done? Those are three guys that are going to sit there and push the heck out of Brooks Baldwin. They are going to push for one of the starting jobs. If Andrew Benintendi's Achilles really does prevent him from playing the outfield a whole lot, they are going to push for playing time over some other established guys on this team. So is that a bad thing? No. Because if they are constantly looking over their shoulder and thinking, I've got to play well and I've got to focus on my job and I got to do my job, those guys that are able to make that leap and sit there and really take charge of it and focus in and hone their talents and learn how to be major leaguers, those are the guys that succeed and end up being, either the stars of your team or the mainstays of your team. The guys that can't do that, that are looking over their shoulder and can't harness their talent, who cares, right? I just let them go by the wayside. That's what baseball has done for decades, right? Guys that can do it physically and mentally stick around. The guys that can't do it, that can't handle the competition, they go away. They disappear. They become a footnote. They become a joke. They become a guy that, you say, I'm going to get that guy's jersey one day just because it's going to garner a laugh when people remember, oh my God, do you remember when we put our faith in this guy? And throughout White Sox history, we've got those guys, right? I mean, there are people walking around with Oscar Colas jerseys right now.
Yeah, there are. Before we get to the Sox nerd, I was looking up, we were discussing Griffin Canning, and I was just kind of curious, like, what pitchers are out there, right? So I did like a quick reference and brought up the MLB.com list. And what they do is they look at your wins above replacement for each position, and they rank everybody in that order. And they use the wins above replacement for the 24 and the 25 season. And it's just so funny when I got to Griffin Canning to try to find guys that were in his little range, right? That the White Sox might be better than Griffin Canning. The name above him that's most comparable is Martin Perez. The name below him that's most comparable is Chris Flexen. It's like the White Sox, they go into the same bin. It's just like, here's this bin of these type of players. Another name that's very close is Mike Soroka. Aaron Savali's very close in his comparison.
My goodness.
Like, I mean, it's all these guys are just in this, like, they're in the shoe bin in the back of the closet. This is where they find their pitchers. Music means the Sox nerd Dave Marin is on the line to give us some trivia nuggets and tidbits, as he always does. He puts them up on the scoreboard at the rate. He comes on Sox in the Basement each and every week to share even more. Brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on this weekend and beyond at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Welcome, Chris and Ed, to Sox Nerd Story Time. The year was 1991, and it was a different time. No phone, no lights, no motor car, not a single luxury. Like Robinson Crusoe, it's primitive as can be. Well, it wasn't that primitive, but there was no internet, and I was culling stats and information using pen and paper, my old Tandy 102, and from old-fashioned sources such as books, newspapers, magazines, TV, and radio. The Sox started 1991 with a protracted road trip to give the team the gargantuan task of getting their new digs ready. New Comiskey Park's premiere was slated for April 18th. In the meantime, I was compiling info on Frank, Robin, Pudge, Ozzie, and the rest of those Sox as I prepared nuggets for display on what would be my 6th season on the scoreboard crew. One of my sources was the Elias Baseball Analyst, a book which contained a split chart for every player. At the bottom of this chart were 2 lines, one that read loves to face, and the other that read hates to face. The pitcher Elias said Carlton Fisk loved to face was Tigers closer Mike Henneman. I made note of this and even updated it, manually remember, when Fisk delivered a go-ahead single in the 8th inning of the Sox 4-1 win at Detroit 6 days before the home opener. That heroic hit made Fisk 6 for 10 with 2 doubles and 5 RBIs against Henneman. Man, I had that stat ready to go just in case the two faced each other in that opening set in Chicago. Sure enough, in the series finale, in came Henneman and up came Fisk and up went the stat. My moment had arrived. I got the typical nice long pudge AB, so the stat, which read something like hitting 600 with 2 doubles and 5 RBIs in his career against Henneman, had lots of airtime. The AB, by the way, resulted in a walk and had no impact on the game, which ended with the Sox getting their first win in their current home. Oh man, I was feeling good about myself. I had the most relevant stat on the board that I could at that moment. And not to brag, but this was not commonplace in the olden days. As the proliferation of information has intensified, these situational stats are expected, but back then you really had to work to find this stuff. Soon after that, we got a message in the control room from on high. You can't put information like that when Sparky Anderson is here. He doesn't have computers or printouts or much information. He manages by his gut. If he saw something like that on the board, it could affect the game. This was Sparky freaking Anderson, Hall of Fame bound Sparky Anderson, 3-time World Series champion Sparky Anderson, the manager of the Big Red Machine Sparky Anderson. Really? But when you think of it, this all made complete sense. Why would Sparky Anderson bring in a pitcher who was owned by Carlton Fisk at a crucial part of the game, especially after Fisk had success against him a week prior? Sparky wanted to go with his best at that point, no matter what. While his plaque in Cooperstown speaks for itself, I like to reflect on this moment as the time the Sox nerd, then only known as Dave Marin, outmanaged the great Sparky Anderson. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, and there may be more where that came from. Before I get to my zinger, let me remind you, all of my 2025 player reviews are finished, and I'm posting birthday updates, a daily Sox list, and almanac items on Twitter and on my WordPress blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger? With the Bears and Packers locking horns this weekend, it's a good time to point out that Pid Purdy, who played for the Sox in 1926, played for the Green Bay Packers in 1926 and 1927. While there are no Bears who played for the White Sox, longtime erratic Bears quarterback Bobby Douglas had a 4-game stint with the Sox AAA affiliate in 1979, well after his Bears career had ended. The strong-arm Douglas posted a 10.29 ERA with 13 walks and no strikeouts before calling it quits. That's it, fellas. Probably more than you wanted to know about old tech, old managers, and the old nerd.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.